The wedding hall was full of light, soft music, and quiet conversations. Crystal glasses clinked, and people dressed in expensive clothes moved from one group to another, smiling politely. To most of them, this wedding was not just about love. It was about status, connections, and future benefits. Powerful families, business partners, and high-level executives had all come together under one roof. The bride stood near the window for a moment. Watching the guests arrive, her face was calm, almost unreadable. She wore a simple smile, nothing forced, nothing dramatic. Many eyes passed over her without much interest. To them, she looked graceful, but ordinary. Just another woman marrying into a powerful family. Some guests whispered quietly as they walked past. "She's lucky." "Marrying into all this," another replied, "yes, but she seems quiet. Not the type to handle real pressure." They did not say these things with cruelty. It was worse than that. They said them with confidence, as if they were stating facts. Across the room, a group of senior executives discussed a major business deal. It was the main reason many of them had flown in from different countries. The number attached to that deal was massive, and everyone knew it. This wedding was just the backdrop. The real event, in their minds, was business. "She won't understand any of this," one man said, glancing briefly toward the bride. "She's probably never been in a serious negotiation." Another laughed lightly. "Let her enjoy the wedding. This world is not for her." The bride heard none of these comments, and even if she had, she would not have reacted. She had learned long ago that reacting too early only gives power to the wrong people. She adjusted her dress and walked back toward the center of the hall. Her posture was relaxed. There was no sign of nervousness, but inside her mind, everything was sharp and focused. She noticed who was speaking to whom. She noticed the tension in certain conversations. She noticed who avoided eye contact and who tried too hard to impress others. This was not her first time in a room like this. It was just the first time people believed she did not belong. Her past was not something she talked about often. Not because she was hiding it, but because she had learned that silence could be useful. Years earlier, when she first entered the professional world, she had spoken too much, explained too much, and tried too hard to prove herself. That only made people push back harder, so she changed. She started listening more than speaking. She let others underestimate her. She let them assume she was there by luck, timing, or someone else's support. It gave her space to move freely. Without resistance now? Standing in the wedding hall, she recognized the same pattern repeating itself. The groom's family moved confidently among the guests, greeting old partners and new investors. They were used to being respected. Their voices carried weight in this room. When they spoke, people leaned in. The bride noticed how rarely anyone asked her opinion. "How are you feeling?" People asked, "Are you excited? Everything looks beautiful, doesn't it?" No one asked her about the deal everyone else was obsessed with. No one wondered what she thought about the numbers, the risks, or the future plans. And that was exactly how she wanted it. She remembered long nights spent reviewing contracts, breaking down financial models, and preparing for meetings where a single mistake could cost millions. She remembered being the only woman in rooms where decisions were made behind closed doors. She remembered being ignored, interrupted, and doubted. Those experiences had not weakened her. They had trained her. A senior guest approached her with a polite smile. He congratulated her and spoke warmly, but his eyes showed mild curiosity, not respect. "You must be relieved," he said. "After today, you can finally relax." She smiled back. "I don't think life really works that way," he chuckled, assuming she was joking, and moved on. Across the room, the business conversation grew more intense. Voices lowered. Faces tightened. Something was not going smoothly. A few executives stepped aside, checking their phones and whispering urgently. The bride noticed this too. She recognized the signs of a deal under stress. It was familiar territory. The tone of voices, the sudden silence, the forced smiles, it all meant the same thing. Something important was slipping. She remained where she was, greeting guests, laughing softly when appropriate. To everyone else, she was just fulfilling her role. But in her mind, she was already mapping out possibilities, who had leverage, who was nervous, who needed this deal more than they admitted. She had spent years learning how to read people in moments like this. Numbers mattered, but emotions mattered just as much. Fear, pride, and impatience could destroy even the strongest agreement. A younger executive passed by and nodded at her politely. He had seen her before, though he could not remember where. There was a brief flicker of recognition in his eyes, but it faded quickly. He assumed he must be mistaken. The bride returned to the window once more. Outside, the city lights reflected off the glass. Everything looked calm from a distance. Inside, tension was slowly building. She thought about how often strength was misunderstood, how people confused silence with weakness and patience with fear. She had benefited from that misunderstanding more times than she could count. Today, was no different. The ceremony began soon after. Guests took their seats. The music softened. Attention shifted away from business, at least on the surface. The bride walked forward with steady steps, her expression composed. As she stood there, she felt none of the doubt others had placed on her. She felt prepared. This was only the beginning. The people in the room believed they knew her story. They believed they had already measured her value. They were wrong, and they would not realize it yet. Not today, not in this moment, but soon. The same room that overlooked her would be forced to listen. For now, she let them believe what they wanted. Silence, after all, was still her strongest move. After the ceremony, the reception began. The hall was brighter now, filled with laughter, music, and the clinking of glasses. Guests moved in small groups, talking, taking photos, and congratulating the bride and groom. On the surface, it all seemed cheerful, full of celebration, but the bride noticed the underlying tension in many faces. The same faces that had whispered about her before now watched her quietly. Measuring her in subtle ways, she moved through the room gracefully, greeting people, exchanging smiles, and thanking those who came from far away. But inside, her mind was working differently. She was alert, aware of the networks forming in real time, of alliances being made quietly in corners, of deals being discussed in hushed tones. To most people, this was a wedding. To her, it was a stage where both personal and professional worlds intersected. Her background was not widely known. Many assumed she had simply married into wealth, that she had not worked for anything substantial on her own. But the truth was different. She had spent years building experience in environments where mistakes were costly, where every decision mattered, and where few people acknowledged her presence. She had navigated corporate storms, handled negotiations that could make or break businesses, and emerged stronger and wiser each time. She noticed a group of executives clustered near the balcony, speaking in low voices and occasionally glancing at their phones. Their body language told her something was wrong. Their gestures were small but sharp, subtle signs of stress that most people would not notice. She had learned to read such signs long ago. Her intuition told her that a significant issue had arisen with a deal worth hundreds of millions. She paid attention without drawing any attention to herself. In this environment, quiet observation was a form of strength at one point. A well-dressed man approached her with a polite smile. He was part of the groom's extended business network. "It must feel wonderful," he said softly. "All this attention and celebration." She smiled back, letting her eyes reveal calmness but hiding the storm of awareness inside her mind. "It is beautiful," she said, "but I prefer focusing on what really matters." He tilted his head slightly, unsure if she was joking or serious. He moved on, leaving her to continue observing the room. Many guests were friendly, polite, and sincere. Others, however, underestimated her entirely. They whispered and assumed they had judged her completely based on appearances. The bride knew appearances were deceptive. Strength often hid in subtlety. She had learned that a quiet demeanor could conceal sharp intelligence and unwavering determination. While the world judged quickly, she moved deliberately, understanding that timing and patience often mattered more than immediate action. She remembered her early career days, when she had been underestimated and dismissed repeatedly. It had been exhausting, even frustrating. People assumed she lacked knowledge, competence, or resilience. She had been young, passionate, and eager, but they saw only her age and her quiet demeanor. Over time, she learned to channel that frustration into strategy. She learned to wait, observe, and strike when the moment was right. She realized that underestimated people often had the advantage because others revealed their intentions too early. Now, in this reception hall, surrounded by influential figures, she was in a familiar situation. She was underestimated again. People assumed she had no understanding of complex financial matters, negotiations, or of the high-stakes world these guests operated in. They believed she was simply a bride enjoying a lavish wedding, completely unaware that she had lived in rooms where decisions worth hundreds of millions of dollars were made, and where every word, gesture, and pause mattered. She kept moving through the crowd, acknowledging congratulations and offering polite words, all while maintaining a calm exterior. Her mind quietly mapped the room. She noted who seemed confident and who seemed anxious. She observed interactions carefully, noticing alliances and subtle tensions. These details, invisible to most, were clear to her trained eye. She understood that success, both in business and life, often depended on understanding people, not just numbers. A few guests approached her with curiosity, asking questions about her background, her interests, and her work. She answered politely, revealing only what was necessary. She allowed them to underestimate her knowledge and influence, knowing that people rarely expected more than a superficial explanation. The deeper truth, the reality of her capabilities, remained private for now. She noticed a small group in a corner, discussing the very deal that many guests had casually mentioned earlier. Their voices were quiet but urgent. Something was going wrong. Some members of the group glanced nervously at their phones and then quickly looked around to make sure no one was watching. The bride sensed the importance of the situation instantly. She recognized the signs of miscommunication, stress, and potential failure. These were not obvious signals, but to her trained observation, they were clear indicators of a deal in trouble. She paused, considering her next steps. To intervene openly now would be premature. People in these circles often overreacted when they believed a woman or someone younger was attempting to influence major decisions. She needed to wait for the right moment. Patience, as always, was her ally. She turned her attention back to the room, engaging in polite conversation while her mind remained sharp, analyzing the dynamics around her. She understood that influence in such settings was subtle. Words mattered, but silence, timing, and observation often mattered even more. By letting others reveal their intentions and vulnerabilities, she could gain insight that no one else in the room had. A few younger attendees approached, asking about her hobbies and personal interests. She answered warmly, laughing lightly at appropriate moments. But even in casual conversation, she paid attention. Tone, body language, and eye movement could reveal more than words ever could. She noticed a nervous glance from one of the executives, a hesitation in another's speech, and a barely perceptible tension in someone else's posture. Each small detail added to the bigger picture she was quietly forming. As the evening progressed, the room's energy shifted. The initial excitement of celebration gave way to deeper conversations, more focused discussions, and subtle negotiations. The bride continued to move through the crowd gracefully, her exterior calm and pleasant. Inside, her mind was active, evaluating, understanding, and preparing. She knew that by remaining underestimated, she had a unique advantage. People were confident that she had no role in the upcoming decisions. They assumed she was unaware of the intricacies of the deal. But her awareness, her experience, and her quiet observation had already given her a clear understanding of the situation. She knew who held power, who had influence, and who could be persuaded when the time was right. The evening's festivities continued. Laughter, music, and dancing filled the room, creating a mask of celebration over the serious undertones of high-stakes negotiations. Guests remained mostly unaware of the quiet strategies unfolding around them. The bride's calm demeanor, polite words, and gentle smile hid a mind working at full capacity, processing information, predicting outcomes, in planning actions. At one point, she excused herself and stepped onto the balcony. The cool air brushed against her face, and she took a moment to breathe. From this vantage point, she could see the room below, the movements of guests, subtle interactions, and the body language of those deeply involved in the deal. She understood that the next steps were critical. She would need to act, but only when the timing was perfect. Her past experiences had taught her the value of patience. She had learned that being underestimated was not a weakness, but a tool. She had seen time and again how people who assumed they understood everything often revealed their vulnerabilities through overconfidence, haste, or carelessness. By waiting and observing, she had gained insight and clarity that others lacked. The bride returned to the reception, her calm exterior unbroken. She continued to greet guests, accept congratulations, and participate in the celebrations. To the casual observer, she appeared to be enjoying a perfect wedding, graceful and polite. But beneath the surface, she was fully aware of the unfolding dynamics, silently preparing for the moment when she would demonstrate her true strength. Throughout the evening, she remained composed, engaging, and attentive. She allowed others to continue underestimating her, confident in the knowledge that appearances could be deceiving. The people who had whispered doubts about her earlier now continued to watch. Still unaware of the depth of her experience and insight, as the reception carried on, the bride reflected briefly on her journey. She remembered the challenges, the moments of doubt, the people who had dismissed her abilities. She had overcome them all, quietly and with determination. Now, in this room filled with influential individuals, she was ready. The moment would come when she would step forward, not with arrogance, but with clarity, precision, and undeniable competence. For now, she allowed herself a quiet satisfaction. The evening was still young, the negotiations uncertain, and the opportunities ahead numerous. She moved through the reception with poise and confidence, fully aware that the true measure of strength was often invisible, hidden beneath calmness, observation, and patience. The bride had mastered that strength, and soon everyone in the room would see it as the evening went on. The energy in the reception hall shifted subtly. At first, it had been light and celebratory, with people laughing, taking photos, and congratulating the newlyweds. But now, in certain corners of the room, conversations had turned serious. Guests were leaning closer, speaking in hushed tones, checking their phones more often, and exchanging concerned glances. It was as if a storm was brewing quietly beneath the surface, unnoticed by most, but visible to those who were paying attention. The bride, with her calm composure and keen observation, noticed everything. She moved with the same poise, smiling and nodding at those who congratulated her, while keeping her eyes alert for the slightest sign of tension. She had always understood that strength often revealed itself not in dramatic actions, but in subtle awareness. And in that room, the first signs of trouble were beginning to appear. A group of executives had gathered near the balcony, away from the main flow of guests. Their expressions were serious, and their gestures tense. The conversation had become quiet, almost secretive. The bride observed from across the room, noting the way one man kept checking his phone, while another spoke quickly, as if trying to convince the others of something. She could feel the pressure in the air, the uncertainty in their voices, and the unspoken concern that the deal they were discussing might not go as planned. Her mind worked quickly, connecting details she had noticed throughout the evening. The way certain people avoided eye contact, the hurried tone of a phone call, the small gestures of frustration, it all painted a picture of a negotiation teetering on the edge. She had seen similar situations countless times before, and she recognized the pattern immediately. When stakes were high, even the most confident individuals could make mistakes under pressure. The bride approached the group with careful steps, not wanting to appear intrusive, but ready to intervene if necessary. She listened from a distance first, letting them reveal their concerns, their vulnerabilities, and the weak points in their strategy. She did not interrupt, did not offer suggestions yet, but absorbed every word, every pause, every subtle signal. Her experience had taught her that timing was everything. Acting too soon could create resistance. Acting too late could miss the opportunity to make a decisive impact. One of the executives spoke sharply, frustration evident in his voice. "We can't move forward like this. There are too many uncertainties, and the other side is playing hardball. If we make a wrong move now, we could lose everything." Another nodded, speaking more cautiously. "I know, but we can't back down either. We've invested too much already. We need a solution, and we need it now." The bride remained calm, her mind analyzing the situation. She understood that their fear and urgency were clouding judgment. They were reacting emotionally, making decisions based on pressure rather than strategy. This was the moment where careful observation and a clear mind could turn the situation around. She stepped slightly closer, enough to be noticed, but without drawing unnecessary attention. One of the younger executives glanced at her briefly, unsure why she was standing nearby. She offered a polite smile and then returned her attention to the group, listening intently. Her presence was subtle, almost invisible, but her awareness was complete. The conversation continued, and the executives began to explore options. They spoke about compromises, concessions, and alternative approaches. Their voices were quieter now, and their body language revealed uncertainty. The bride noticed that some of the proposals being considered were risky, potentially jeopardizing the entire deal. She mentally reviewed her past experiences, recalling similar situations where quick thinking and calm intervention had saved agreements from collapse. A few minutes passed, and the tension grew. The executives were reaching the limits of their patience, and the stakes were clear. One wrong decision could lead to significant losses. The bride weighed her options carefully. She could intervene directly, offering guidance and insight, but she needed to choose the right moment. Too soon, and her suggestions might be dismissed. Too late, and the opportunity to steer the outcome could be lost. She continued to observe, noting subtle shifts in the group's dynamics. One man was clearly anxious, fidgeting and avoiding eye contact. Another seemed frustrated with the process, impatient for a resolution. The third appeared calm, but was quietly calculating, considering every option. These observations were crucial. They revealed not only the current state of the negotiation, but also the personalities and priorities of the individuals involved. Finally, a small opening presented itself. One of the executives, overwhelmed by frustration, made a statement that revealed a critical misunderstanding in the deal. It was subtle, almost hidden in the flow of conversation, but the bride noticed immediately. She recognized the potential impact of this misunderstanding. If left uncorrected, it could unravel the entire agreement. She stepped forward slightly, ensuring her presence was acknowledged without being intrusive. The executives looked at her, surprised by her attentiveness. One of them hesitated, then spoke, "Do you have any thoughts on this?" She smiled gently, maintaining a calm and reassuring tone. "I think there's a point that needs clarification. If we address it carefully, we can strengthen the agreement and prevent potential issues down the line." Her words were measured, confident, and non-confrontational. They did not challenge anyone directly, but offered a solution that the group could consider. The executives paused, exchanging glances, and then nodded. They began to listen, realizing that her insight was valuable. Her presence had shifted the dynamics subtly but decisively. She continued outlining the issue in simple, clear terms. She explained the potential risks and suggested a course of action that minimized those risks while preserving the integrity of the deal. The executives listened intently, absorbing her observations. Her calm demeanor, precise language, and clear understanding of the situation commanded attention without arrogance as she spoke. The atmosphere in the group changed. Tension eased slightly, and confidence began to return. The executives were no longer acting purely out of stress and fear. They were considering her guidance carefully. Her subtle intervention had introduced clarity, allowing the group to approach the problem rationally rather than emotionally. She had not taken control aggressively. She had not demanded attention or forced her opinions. Instead, she had waited, observed, and acted at the right moment, using her knowledge and experience to guide others. This approach was far more effective than confrontation. It allowed her to influence the outcome without creating resistance. By the end of the conversation, The executives were working together more cohesively. They had identified the critical points, agreed on a strategy, and were preparing to implement it. The bride stepped back slightly, allowing them to continue without further interference. Her presence had been felt, her insight acknowledged, and the course of the deal was now moving in a more secure direction. The bride returned to the main reception area, her calm exterior unchanged. To most of the guests, she had simply been observing, smiling politely, and enjoying the event. Few could have guessed the impact she had just made behind the scenes. The same people who had assumed she was inexperienced or weak now had a subtle awareness that she was not as they had believed. She moved through the crowd, acknowledging congratulations and engaging in polite conversation, all while maintaining the same level of awareness. Every gesture, word, and glance mattered. She continued to observe the dynamics of the room, noting who was relaxed, who was tense, and who might require further attention later. Her mind remained active, processing information and preparing for the next phase of the evening. As the reception continued, the bride reflected quietly on the events of the past few hours. She had been underestimated, dismissed, and judged based on appearances. Yet she had navigated a complex situation with subtlety and precision. Her experience, patience, and calm observation had allowed her to intervene effectively at the perfect moment. The executives had been guided, the deal had been stabilized, and she had done it without drawing undue attention to herself. Her journey had taught her the value of quiet strength. It was not always visible, and it was not always recognized immediately, but it was powerful. By understanding people, observing patterns, and acting at the right time, she had achieved results that others often assumed required force, dominance, or confrontation. True strength, she knew, was often invisible to those who were not paying close attention. As the evening carried on, the bride remained composed, graceful, and attentive. The music played, guests laughed, and the celebration continued. But beneath the surface, the events she had influenced quietly shifted the dynamics of the evening. Her presence, her insight, and her subtle actions had already begun to reshape the perceptions of those around her. The people who had underestimated her now had a hint of awareness that she was far more capable than they had assumed. For the bride, the night was far from over. She knew that more challenges lay ahead, that the true test of her abilities was still to come. But in this moment, she had demonstrated the power of calm observation, strategic patience, and precise action. She had begun to prove that the assumptions made about her were wrong, and she was ready for the next stage, where her influence would become even more apparent and undeniable. The night had grown deeper. The reception was winding down. Music played softly now, and laughter was lighter, more relaxed. Yet in one corner of the hall, a different kind of energy pulsed. The executives involved in the $950 million deal were still in a quiet cluster. Papers shuffled, phones checked, and whispers exchanged. The tension that had begun earlier had not disappeared. It had only become more focused, concentrated around the critical points of the negotiation. The bride moved closer, her steps calm but deliberate. She had been observing, listening, and analyzing for hours. Now, she could see the weak points, the inconsistencies, and the opportunities to strengthen the deal. She had waited for this exact moment. When the room's tension and the executive's uncertainty made them receptive to a steady, clear mind, one executive, clearly overwhelmed, spoke first. "We can't move forward unless someone takes charge. I don't know how to resolve the discrepancies in the proposal." Another added, frustration lacing his voice. "Every option we consider seems risky. If we miscalculate, the losses will be catastrophic." The bride stepped forward slightly, ensuring her presence was recognized, but without appearing to dominate. She spoke, clearly, calmly, and with authority that demanded attention, not through volume, but through the precision of her words. "There is a way to move forward," she said, "but it requires focusing on the core issues and removing unnecessary assumptions that are clouding our judgment." The executives paused, looking at her. Some surprise flickered in their eyes. Few had expected her to intervene, and even fewer expected her clarity and confidence. They listened cautiously as she began to outline her observations, She spoke of the weak points in the original proposal, the areas where misunderstandings could create setbacks, and the potential risks that had been overlooked in the rush to finalize the deal. She did not criticize anyone personally. She simply highlighted the facts, calmly and logically, connecting the dots in a way that revealed the structure of the problem clearly. Her understanding of the deal was precise. She referenced figures, timelines, and possible outcomes with accuracy, demonstrating an insight that the executives could not ignore. Her presence shifted the dynamics of the group. Confidence began to return, not because she imposed it, but because she provided clarity where there had been uncertainty. One of the executives, still hesitant, asked, "How do you suggest we proceed?" She smiled lightly. "We start by clarifying the key points that both sides agree on. Then we adjust the areas of disagreement with conditions that protect both interests. If we follow this sequence, we can finalize the agreement without unnecessary risk." Her approach was methodical. It was not forceful, but it was decisive. She broke down complex issues into understandable steps, allowing the executives to follow her reasoning without feeling threatened. Slowly, the tension in the room began to ease. The group leaned in, listened more attentively, and began to discuss her suggestions seriously. As they started to implement her recommendations, the bride monitored the progress closely. She noticed how quickly the mood shifted once the focus was clear. Confusion and anxiety gave way to purpose and strategy. Decisions that had seemed impossible were now being made efficiently. The deal, which had been on the edge of collapse, was being stabilized under her guidance. One executive, previously overwhelmed, looked at her with a mix of gratitude and astonishment. "I can't believe how clearly you see this," he said. "We were lost until you stepped in." She remained humble, replying softly, "It's not about me. It's about understanding the facts and addressing them calmly. That is what solves problems." As the discussion continued, she identified an opportunity that had been overlooked. There was a clause in the agreement that could have caused significant long-term complications if ignored. She pointed it out, suggesting a modification that protected all parties while enhancing the value of the deal. The executives nodded, impressed by her foresight. Her recommendation was immediately incorporated. The deal began moving toward completion. Her strategic patience and calm intervention had transformed the atmosphere. What had been a room filled with tension, stress, and uncertainty was now a place of focus, collaboration, and progress. The executives were no longer reacting to panic. They were working systematically, guided by her insight. She maintained a quiet presence throughout, allowing them to lead the conversation while subtly steering the outcome. Her words were precise, her observations accurate, and her confidence unwavering. Every suggestion she made was grounded in logic, experience, and careful analysis. The deal's final stage approached. The remaining issues were complex but manageable. She guided the executives through the final steps, ensuring that every condition was clear and agreed upon by all parties. Her influence was felt in every decision, every adjustment, and every confirmation. By the time the final signatures were ready, the $950 million agreement was solid, secure, and more advantageous than initially projected. The room's energy shifted once more. Relief replaced tension, and quiet satisfaction replaced anxiety. The executives looked around, some exchanging smiles of disbelief. They had reached a successful conclusion, and much of the credit belonged to the bride, who had remained calm, observant, and strategic throughout the process. The bride stepped back slightly, letting them finalize the signatures. To anyone outside the group, it might have seemed like ordinary procedure, a routine conclusion to a business discussion. But to those who had been present, the impact was clear. Her subtle guidance, her clarity of thought, and her unwavering composure had turned a near disaster into a success as the deal was confirmed. She finally allowed herself a small breath of satisfaction. She had proven, without dramatics or confrontation, that she was more than capable. Those who had underestimated her were beginning to understand, even if only subtly, that she possessed intelligence, experience, and influence far beyond what appearances had suggested. She returned to the center of the reception hall, her calm exterior intact. Music, conversation, and celebration continued around her, but the memory of the decisive moments remained vivid. Guests continued to congratulate the couple, unaware of the quiet, strategic victory that had just occurred. Yet, the executives knew. They understood, even if silently. The bride had been the guiding force in stabilizing a deal of extraordinary magnitude. Throughout the remainder of the evening, she moved gracefully among the guests, engaging in polite conversation, smiling warmly, and maintaining her composed demeanor. The world outside the immediate circle of the deal remained oblivious to her influence. But the executives and those closely observing had witnessed something remarkable. Her patience, intelligence, and subtlety had reshaped the evening's outcome. She reflected quietly on the process. True strength, she knew, did not always come with bold statements or dramatic gestures. It often came quietly, through observation, preparation, and precise action. By waiting for the right moment and understanding the people and the situation, she had achieved results that many would assume required power, dominance, or confrontation. Yet she had done it with calm, intelligence, and strategic subtlety. The deal, now finalized, had secured not only financial success, but also respect. The same people who had once underestimated her were beginning to see a different reality. The bride's presence, her insight, and her quiet confidence had transformed the assumptions in the room. They would not make the mistake of underestimating her again. As the night drew to a close, she stood quietly for a moment, observing the room. Guests danced, laughed, and celebrated, unaware of the critical moments that had taken place just steps away from the main festivities. She allowed herself a small smile, knowing that her actions had made a lasting impact. The $950 million deal was not just a business victory, it was a personal affirmation of her capabilities, her judgment, and her quiet strength. The bride moved back to the celebration, gracefully blending into the joyous atmosphere. To the outside eye, she remained the composed, polite, and elegant bride. But to those who had witnessed her insight in action, she had revealed a force of competence, intelligence, and influence that was undeniable. She had proven that appearances could be deceiving, that patience and observation were powerful tools, and that true strength often revealed itself in quiet, strategic moments. The evening continued, guests unaware of the remarkable transformation that had occurred. Yet for the bride, the night had marked a turning point. She had faced a challenge, seized the moment with clarity and skill, and emerged victorious. The $950 million deal, once precarious, was now secure. And the respect she had earned was quiet but absolute. She had shown that being underestimated was not a weakness. It was an opportunity, one she had seized with precision and grace. The reception was slowly coming to an end. Guests were gathering their coats, saying their final goodbyes, and leaving in small groups. The music had softened to a gentle background hum, and the hall felt calmer, lighter, and more relaxed than it had hours before. The bride moved among the remaining guests with the same grace and composure she had maintained all evening. Smiles, polite words, and small gestures of appreciation flowed naturally from her. But beneath the surface, she carried a quiet satisfaction. Earlier that evening, she had stepped into a room filled with tension, stress, and uncertainty. The $950 million deal had seemed fragile, on the verge of unraveling. Executives had been anxious, hesitant, and overwhelmed, unsure of the next step. Yet, by observing quietly, understanding the dynamics, and acting at the precise moment, she had guided the situation to a successful conclusion. The deal was now secure, stronger than anyone had imagined. And she had done it without fanfare, without confrontation, and without seeking attention. The people she had influenced were aware of her presence and guidance. Though no one outside their circle fully understood the role she had played, a few executives approached her subtly, their expressions a mixture of relief, gratitude, and awe. They did not speak loudly about what had just transpired, nor did they boast about the influence she had wielded. Instead, their eyes and quiet nods conveyed recognition and respect. One man, usually stern and unflappable, offered a small smile. "Your insights tonight, they made all the difference. We couldn't have reached this outcome without you. The bride accepted the acknowledgement with a gentle smile. I'm glad we could find clarity together, she replied. Her tone was calm, unassuming, yet carried a weight that made it clear her contribution was significant. She had learned long ago that humility could be more powerful than pride. That subtle influence often left a stronger impression than overt display. She walked back toward the center of the hall. Observing the final interactions among guests, conversations had shifted. Where whispers of doubt had existed earlier, there was now a quiet curiosity, an unspoken reassessment. People who had assumed she was inexperienced or incapable were beginning subtly to recognize her depth and capability. It was not loud or dramatic. It was a gentle, creeping awareness that she was more than they had initially believed. The bride took a moment to reflect. She thought about the journey that had led her here. Years of preparation, learning, and experience had brought her to this point. She had faced doubt, dismissal, and underestimation countless times before. Each challenge had been a lesson, each setback a training ground. The skills she had honed quietly, away from the spotlight, had allowed her to act decisively when it mattered most, as she moved among the guests. She noticed small gestures that reflected the change in perception. A nod from a senior executive, a glance of acknowledgement from a business partner, a subtle tone of respect in a casual conversation. None of these gestures were dramatic, but each one confirmed what she already knew. Her presence and her actions had shifted the room. The bride paused near a table where a few of the executives had gathered. They were reviewing documents, ensuring that everything regarding the deal was properly documented and finalized. The earlier stress and tension had been replaced by a quiet focus and collaboration. She listened briefly, offering guidance only when necessary, and ensured that clarity and precision were maintained in every decision. Her influence was evident, yet it was exercised with discretion, allowing others to maintain their agency and dignity. She noticed the subtle changes in attitude from those who had doubted her earlier. Where there had been whispers and assumptions about weakness, there was now a cautious acknowledgement of strength. Respect had been earned, not demanded. The people who had underestimated her could no longer ignore her competence. They had witnessed her skill in action, and it was undeniable. Throughout the evening, she had maintained her composure and elegance. There had been no grand announcements, no dramatic displays of power. Instead, she had relied on observation, insight, and timing. By choosing the right moment to act, and by presenting her guidance clearly and calmly, she had ensured that the outcome was successful without creating unnecessary conflict. This approach had strengthened not only the deal but also her own confidence and sense of agency. As the last guests began to leave, the bride took a moment to herself. The hall was quiet now, the remnants of celebration lingering in the soft lighting and scattered decorations. She looked around, absorbing the sense of closure and accomplishment. The day had been filled with appearances, judgments, and expectations, but she had navigated it with clarity, patience, and strength. She had demonstrated quietly and effectively that true capability often lies beneath the surface, in the ability to observe, understand, and act at the right moment. The groom approached, offering a warm smile. You handled everything tonight with such grace. I can't tell you how much it meant. She smiled back, feeling the genuine warmth in his voice. It was a team effort. Everyone played a part. Her humility was sincere, yet she knew the impact of her actions was significant. The $950 million deal, which had seemed precarious at the start of the evening, was now secure and even stronger. The respect she had earned was quiet but absolute. Those who had assumed she was weak had witnessed her competence firsthand. They would not underestimate her again. She walked slowly toward the exit, allowing herself a final look around the hall. The night had been long, challenging, and filled with subtle victories. She felt a sense of calm satisfaction, knowing that she had managed not only the complexities of the deal, but also the expectations of those around her. Her quiet strength had made a difference, and it had done so in a way that was measured, deliberate, and effective. As she stepped outside, the cool night air welcomed her. The sounds of the city, distant and steady, contrasted with the intensity of the evening she had just navigated. She breathed deeply, appreciating the moment of reflection and the sense of accomplishment that came from knowing she had handled a high-stakes situation with skill and grace. The bride had faced assumptions, underestimation, and doubt. She had confronted complexity, uncertainty, and pressure, and she had succeeded. Without seeking attention, without dramatic gestures, she had proven that strength and capability often reside in patience, observation, and precise action. The $950 million deal was secure, and the respect she had earned was genuine and enduring. As she walked away from the hall, she carried with her the quiet confidence that comes from knowing one has acted with integrity, intelligence, and purpose. The people who had doubted her would remember the outcome, even if they did not fully understand how it had been achieved. And she knew, in her own mind and heart, that she had not only proven them wrong, but it also demonstrated the true power of calm. Strategic strength. The night closed around her, the city lights shimmering, and she felt a sense of completeness. The wedding, the deal, and the subtle victories of the evening had revealed something essential. Being underestimated is not a weakness, but an opportunity. By acting with patience, insight, and decisiveness, she had turned that opportunity into undeniable success. She had proven, once and for all, that appearances can be deceiving. That strength often works quietly, and that true capability shines through action, not assumption. The bride had faced doubt and judgment. She had emerged not only victorious but respected, admired, and most importantly, confident in her own abilities.